Black Magic Woman podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on. We also acknowledge traditional owners of the land where you, the listener or viewer, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to our elders past and present and acknowledge that this always was Aboriginal land and always will be Aboriginal land.
This episode is proudly brought to you by ANZ, a new series of conversations with different mob around the country to yarn about meaningful career opportunities within ANZ, building the capacity of Indigenous businesses and organisations, and helping individuals in the broader community to achieve financial wellbeing and resilience.
Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Mandanara Bales.
Welcome back to another deadly episode of the ANZ Black Magic Woman Partnership Series. I am excited to be able to bring you a deadly yarn by a deadly sister. This yarn is an opportunity to hear from some of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff or employees at ANZ. Just hear about their journey and some of the things that they've been working on in the business, which I think is really important, especially for a lot of our community members that might be thinking of opportunities in ANZ, or even if you are working in the business, it'd be good for you to even reach out to people like Kylie Cummings. So, sis, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. If you don't mind, can you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your mob and where you grew up? And I always say this, is there anything that we can't find on Google?
Can't find on Google, there's a lot. Thanks, Mandanara. Yeah, so start with my mob. I live in the Mornington Peninsula. And I have two young kids, similar ages to some of yours, 8 and 11, Lockie and Maisie, and my lovely husband, Ricky Hayward. So we live on a beautiful space up there, just overlooking the water, so that's nice. We built out there a long time ago. But yes, I am the domain lead for technology for the commercial bank. And so I've been working at ANZ now for my 5-year anniversary is in October. So yeah, we've been doing, a lot of great work from a technology point of view, but I was really looking forward to this conversation so I could share some of the stuff we're doing to support our First Nations people and, how I'm trying to give back.
Yep, deadly. So I'm going to go back one step now because you're telling me when you was about 10, and this is the kind of yarns that we have when we catch up, and it's a part of that relationship building of getting to know each other. And I think it's a good opportunity for non-Aboriginal people to understand some of the impacts of colonialism and past government policies, which the Stolen Generations was part of the act or policy to remove Aboriginal children from their families and to assimilate us into white society, and put into institutions or out on missions and, refused a lot of things in terms of just basic and essential human rights, which is to be able to stay with our families and to stay on our country and to practice our culture and to speak our language. So your family were impacted.
Yeah, massively so. So, as we were talking earlier, I found out that I had Aboriginal heritage when I was 10. And it wasn't widely talked about in my family because my grandmother was taught to hide it because they were worried they were going to be taken. So we thought, my nana, if anybody asked, would say we were, what was it?
Egyptian? Maltese.
Maltese Egyptian.
Yeah.
Yep, that
Not
was
Black Irish or
No.
Spanish or Indian. So my nan assumed the identity of an Indian woman to keep her children, my mother.
Yeah, and we had a similar story. So when you said that, it was maybe on our BlackCard training, all of a sudden I had an epiphany because literally I think a month before, my dad and I had been doing Ancestry.com and we kind of were mapping our family tree. And so we knew our grandfather, Joe Johnson, was half caste and his father...
Was that written on the documents, half caste?
Yes. And so it was this... He was born in Newcastle. It was really, before Ancestry.com, it was really hard to track down the history.
Yeah.
And so we found his documents. He actually served in Gallipoli as well, so we had his war records. But all of this was really hard to find. And we also...
It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Oh, and it's an impossible jigsaw puzzle as well.
They've literally made it next to impossible for mob to find their family.
Well, and this is the thing, I'm still learning, because I think you asked me once, who's my mob? I still don't know who my mob is.
Yeah.
I haven't had the chance to follow it up.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of these days, Dad and I will do the work and we'll find it out.
Yeah.
But all we know is that, you know, my great-grandfather was born in Newcastle. The reason he is easier to find than most, though, is because he was the first Aboriginal to play VFL football in Australia. So he played in 2 grand finals in 1904 and 1905 for Fitzroy. So he's easily searchable because...
And he identified as Aboriginal back then?
Back then he did, yes.
Okay.
So it wasn't until, I think, I'm not sure when it would have happened, but my nana at some point was told basically to tell people that she was Maltese Egyptian.
Yep.
There wasn't until so there was this article coming out in the paper when I was, I'd say about 16. So it was when my brother was playing footy for Fitzroy. But an article was coming out in The Age of 4 generations of AFL Aboriginal footballers. And that's when it all came out, because my dad hid it, no one knew, my brothers would hide it. I was a bit different, as you can imagine. When I found out I had Aboriginal heritage, I went to school and I told everybody at show and tell that I was Aboriginal. I was so proud. And that's the way I spent my whole entire life.
Yeah.
My family thought I was crazy. When that article came out, my dad rang my nana because he knew her sensitivity around it. And the thing she said to him, he remembers it clearly. She said, "Okay, darling, but just be careful. If the government come to your door, don't let them in."
Yeah.
And my dad didn't.
Trauma.
Well, Dad didn't even know what she meant, because my dad hadn't grown up with that kind of fear.
Yeah, it's so far removed from your experience and your dad's experience as white fellas.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you met my dad, I think we were talking about my nana the other day, last night, and she was this short little lady, about 5 foot nothing, with really tight black curls, beautiful brown eyes. But because her mum was Irish, she was like pale as a ghost.
Yeah.
So, and my dad's very similar colourings.
Yeah.
So, you know, it wasn't actually, my dad told me recently his story, he actually went to his uncle, because it wasn't discussed, and he went to his uncle when he was playing footy, and he said, "Uncle, people keep on telling me I'm Italian, I'm this, I'm that, I don't know who I am. Who am I?" Because I wouldn't talk about it.
Of course.
And he went to his uncle and he went, who are we? Where's our heritage? And so my uncle then told him, but I think my dad would have been about 16, 17, maybe 18, something along those lines. So he had, you know, and it's a big thing of knowing your identity. Like, we didn't know, and I still don't know, and I'm really interested to find out. So the more conversations we have, the more I learn.
Of course.
That story around your nana about, you know, that Indian heritage, we had on the ancestry.com, it had that my great-great-grandfather, which was interesting, was Indian, but he had 2 white parents on ancestry.com. And I'm like, how does that work exactly? So,
well, they adopted him. He must have been adopted by the 2 white parents.
Yes.
We don't know.
They go back to, and so we track that, they go back to England.
Yes.
But yes.
You can't pinpoint your country and your connection to community.
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
And I love this, Kylie, that we get to have these yarns, because a lot of Aboriginal people, whether you've grown up Aboriginal or you found out, you know, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, some people might feel a little bit defeated or deflated or lost, or there's too many blockers. Like, we got to this dead ends, can't find it, and some people give up.
Yeah.
Some people, live their whole life searching for their mob.
Yeah, and I think it's one of these things where I think family's important, hugely important to me. We have an extremely large family, but it's knowing, putting the pieces of the puzzle together, because there's so much my dad still doesn't know.
Yeah. When
I listened to your BlackCard training, I said this to you last night, I had to go off camera at one point because I ended up in tears, because I recognised it was too familiar, and it was too emotional and too raw, because there's a whole piece of you just don't know.
Yeah. And you know what? I talk about that at the BlackCard training, that I am actually the first generation on my mother's side that was not forcibly removed under government policy.
Wow.
My mother was removed, and her mother was removed, and I've got 5 generations of my mother's side, my grandmothers and my great-grannies that were all institutionalised and sent out to work as domestic servants. And I've got the records there. I've got all of the evidence there about my family history. So my mother had red hair and freckles. Her name was Catherine Maria O'Reilly. Her dad was an Irishman.
O'Reilly, love it.
And she just said, I'm a Koori woman. She used to say we're Gweagal, but we didn't know where Gweagal country was. And my mother passed 23 years ago. I was 18. And by the time she passed, we knew that we were Wonnarua from the Hunter Valley, outside of Newcastle, so we could be related.
We could.
We could be.
That would make... all of a sudden, a lot would make sense.
We just clicked when we first met. And I didn't even know Kylie was an Aboriginal woman.
No. I was always very proud of it. And so it's hilarious. When you say you don't tick the box, I feel like I tick it twice.
You let everyone know.
Yeah, I let everybody know.
Yeah, you're not undercover at all.
I don't live in fear about it. I'm extremely proud about it. And there's very few people who have been able to intimidate me about it.
Yeah.
But there have been a few.
Because you're strong within who you are in your own identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, I'm strong in my identity, but I could tell you now, Kylie.
Oh, it's different though.
Sometimes, and I can navigate public spaces and no one knows I'm Aboriginal. So sometimes I try and fly under the radar. Sometimes just to have a normal day so I don't have to do cultural awareness with an Uber driver.
Oh, God.
And just fly under the radar. But anyways, in terms of now, here you are at ANZ. I know that you've been on a journey within the business and been kicking some goals. And I just want to say thank you for bringing me in not that long ago to do a half-day session in person with a senior leadership group.
Yeah.
That was pretty deadly.
No, that was great. And look, I'm constantly championing for people to do the BlackCard training because regardless of, and obviously at ANZ we have a lot of people from all different backgrounds,
That's Australia, 300 different nationalities.
Well, Melbourne's the mecca because it's, and this is the funny thing is I've always grown up with all different nationalities.
Yeah.
So it's really important that people understand because the other thing is the BlackCard training is amazing, but it's challenging because we learnt a certain history at school and then it's not that you give us a different history, you give us a different slant on the history.
A different perspective.
There's a different perspective.
An Aboriginal perspective.
Well, we were never taught the Aboriginal perspective. It was just the English one. Not that I remember anyway.
Yeah.
So, mind you, I am getting older these days, but we weren't taught it. And it was really nice. Actually, my boss said to me, he said, Kylie, I can't wait. He was really excited about it. I can't wait because he's from Ireland and he found it really interesting because obviously Ireland's been oppressed, right?
Yeah.
So, the whole team loved it. It was great. I warned them. I said, you go on a roller coaster ride. I said, I ended up in tears. But it's a good roller coaster ride because at the end of it, you want to do something.
Yeah.
And I think part of when I did the BlackCard training, I'd been asked by Gerard Florian to represent group technology on the RAP. So I do that, which I love. What the team are trying to do there, Lou and her team are just fantastic. And then it made me think about, well, how can I give back?
Yeah.
And so what I talked to Lou about and Gerard and Paul, who are highly supportive of it, is building out a technology career pathway for Indigenous
students, young people.
Kids. Well, kids, it's because I'm 45. Cut that out. But, anybody who's 18 now is a kid to me. But it's about giving them the opportunity and showing them what they can do. If you're good at maths, or not even, it's not even that. There are so many career pathways, but I kind of thought of engineering career pathways because my logic, this is kind of where my mind goes, is I went, right, how do we keep people with their communities? Well, with technology you can work from anywhere, especially engineers, so coding. People can learn coding, but people can teach coding themselves if they really want to. So how do we enable that? And so I actually met up with a great organisation recently and we're just still in early stages, but Deadly Coders, and we're working through what does that look like? What does the cohorts need to look like? How do we make it a success? Because as you can imagine, there's numerous things you need to think about to make it a success. How do you support these kids when they come into, because what we're trying to look at is Melbourne first. So how do you support these kids? How do you make sure, like with all grads, that they come in together that they can support each other, that they have the right mentors in place, that we have the right feedback loops to make sure that they're getting what they need. And because every kid's different, we'll be looking at, how do we bring in a cohort of students?
Yes.
How do we support them? And then how do we basically expand that out further? So that's some of the work that we're doing. But also one of my colleagues, Ben Anderson, can't take credit for this at all. He's also looking at how do we actually extend career pathways. So we've got a lot of Indigenous Australians working in our branches, and what we're looking at is how do we actually bring them into technology. So he's looking at career pathways for that as well. So there's a lot of stuff that we're doing, and that's just a couple of things that, I'm across.
Yes. There was one really good program that I got to be part of, and you invited me with a beautiful Māori sister as well, who works in ANZ.
Yes.
And I'm trying to think of her name, Megan.
Megan Tapsley.
I remembered your name. And I've only met you twice, but Megan and I were able to co-facilitate a session to your grads.
Yes.
It was part of their onboarding, their first week. Was it their second day in the business?
I'm not sure.
Or third day?
Yeah. Well, because remember, I was sick.
You got COVID.
Got COVID. I was so upset. I was so looking forward to it.
Because you were going to moderate the panel discussion with Megan and I.
I think I may have dodged a bullet there because I don't think I would have got a word in edgewise. But,
We done really well. We did do it within the time. But you know what? For a lot of those, big corporates that are listening to this yarn, having your 100 or whatever grads in the room, starry-eyed, don't know about reconciliation. So this was an opportunity for me to talk about ANZ.
Yeah.
There was one of your team members that spoke about you right before us anyways.
Yep.
So that session...
That would have been Lou.
There was a good segue into Megan and I talking about Indigenous knowledges and storytelling.
Yeah.
And just weaving in our culture and how we could influence the way that leaders within the business can be guided by Aboriginal knowledge and Aboriginal ways of knowing, being and doing. But this is your grads.
Yeah, and this is the thing though that's important that you teach, and it was kind of like in the BlackCard training, it was like I had a bit of an epiphany moment. There were a few things that you said within there around how you introduce yourself. It's about where you're from, your family, that's who you are.
Yeah.
Which I loved because I do that. Those people who know me, who will be listening to this, know that I lead with, who are you? Like, we have a conversation first before we get down to business, and you go, that's how we do things.
That's it. And so that's being relational.
Yes, and sometimes I get pulled up on that, going, Kylie, you might want to just get down to business.
Yes, but it's because they think traditionally that's
you're wasting time.
Yeah, but also your personal staff and your professional is two different things. So in the workplace,
be all business.
It's all business. We keep it professional. And we leave the kind of the human part of us and the biggest part, most important part of us, kind of out. Or unless we've really got good relationships, then we are more comfortable. But otherwise, it's strictly your titles and your job function.
Yeah, that's usually the
agenda.
introduction.
And we've only got half an hour.
Yeah, and so I loved when you, me, and Megan met. It was right. So this is how we're
straight into.
Yeah, this is how we're going to introduce ourselves
in Aboriginal terms of reference.
Yes.
And Megan's like, this is perfect because for Māori people, and I'm not saying I'm an expert in Māori culture, but very similar. My family, my iwi, your tribe, and your mountain, and maybe your river or the canoe. Like there was this whole introduction that was based on, where I'm from rather than this is what I do. So Megan was like, this is easy.
Yes.
And we're just going to do this. And we gave the grads an activity for them to get to know
each other. But it cements a relationship, and this is the thing that I get told I'm good at, right, is creating relationships, and it's because I do it that way. And it's not actually anything that I do, it's not a deliberate thing, it's just who I am.
Yes.
And also
it's more natural. That's how you operate.
That's how I operate. And the other thing you said to me around Aboriginal culture, which I love, was that it's not hierarchical. There is no boss. Yeah. There is no... All of a sudden I went, oh, my life makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think I've ever recognised hierarchy in my life.
You don't put yourself above...
No.
Don't put yourself above other people.
No, never. Never have, never will. It's not how I'm built.
I love
Everybody's equal.
Just Western society.
Yeah.
It's highly competitive, highly egotistical, and it's all about the individual.
Yep.
And quite judgmental.
Can be,
So
yeah.
how do we bring these two worlds closer together? And I think that's the beauty of BlackCard training, is that we're teaching, or we're not teaching, we're educating people
Yeah.
about the tens of thousands of years of accumulated knowledge that comes from this land, and how do we utilise this knowledge to inform how we lead, or just in terms of just how we be better human beings. How do we be a good human?
And it's amazing how it did take everybody on a roller coaster ride, and it does everybody, which I love.
Yeah.
And I did say to you, I don't know how you've structured that, but you've structured it perfectly. And I know there's method in the madness, I have no doubts. But it was just, it's one of those things where you take away from it what you can't remember everything, but there was so much I took away from it. And so much of me all of a sudden made sense.
Good, and that's what we love for Aboriginal people, to be able to make sense of who they are and why they do, their habits, their values.
And how it made me start thinking about what was genetic versus learnt, things like that. So, but it was just such an amazing, and it does make you, so frankly, if you take on those things around creating relationships, it does make you a great leader. If you are a person who people can relate to, and I'm really lucky, I have, my boss, Paul White, he's an amazing leader. He's very personable and he cares, genuinely cares. And then you've got Gerard Florian, again, similar dynamic, right? But, I think it's one of those things around being able to engage with your people if they know who you are and they love the work. The key thing that I always say with culture within my area is, if people come in and they love who they work with and they love what they do, it's not work. And they perform at their best.
Of course.
And so that's why, and you're right, banks, actually large enterprises, can be completely hierarchical, but it's about us as leaders making sure we're more approachable.
I'm going to ask you a question around being a leader, right? And you are quite senior in the business, in this big hierarchy. Who's been your mentor? Like, is there anyone in the business that's kind of supported you to be able to take on these leadership roles?
I've had numerous, and it's kind of about your people, right? I've got amazing female support within the bank. I don't think I was acting in a CIO role for about 5-6 months while Paul was actually coming into the role. And I don't think I would have put my hand up for that unless I had quite a few of my female colleagues went, you need to put your hand up.
Yeah,
You'd be great at it. You can do this. I'm like, no, I can't. They're like, no, yes, you can. So I did. I still remember Gerard calling me up and asking me to fill in. And Gerard's been a great support. Megan, his CIO, great support. Like, ANZ's got some really great leaders who are really supportive. They want to see you succeed. Yeah. So I honestly feel very blessed, but I will also say that I have an amazingly supportive husband.
Of course.
Who also, tells me I can do anything. And I think we've had this conversation before, but my dad used to be a footy coach, so I always joke that I wasn't brought up, I was coached up. So my dad's always like, the only person stopping you is you. And, all these things get, bounced around in my head, but my dad's also an amazing support as well. But, I've been very lucky, like, I've got a very tight-knit family. My middle brother's the same. My eldest brother's, even though he doesn't quite know what I do for a living. You
better know what she does, mate. She's a deadly woman.
Works in computers, if you ask him.
A bit more than that.
Yeah, just slightly. But yeah, no, I must admit, and my team, I've had probably a stressful year around my health, and my team have been amazing in supporting me. When I'm not there, they get in, they lean in. So I've got support everywhere. It's absolutely fantastic. So I feel very blessed where I am.
And that just leads into my last question, especially for some of our younger Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women at ANZ. I know there's a few black fellas working at ANZ. I want them to know that there are people like you in the business.
Absolutely.
That can support them or can have a coffee with them. So reach out.
Please do.
You're not alone, and sometimes it does feel quite isolating and overwhelming when you're trying to navigate these big structures.
Oh, of course it
whether
does.
it's ANZ or working at Qantas or in the government. Like, sometimes you do feel like you're alone when you don't find your people.
And sometimes it's all it takes is a conversation. I was literally having this conversation with someone else yesterday saying, what I learnt, and I wasn't always this way when I was, and I know people find this hard to believe, but in my early 20s I was quite shy, and now not so much. But the thing that I figured out is, what's the worst thing that can happen? Ask for a coffee. Do that. Ask for advice.
Yeah.
Seek guidance.
That's what we need. Just that reassurance.
And some direction. From some people who have navigated it before. I seek direction all the time. I'm constantly learning. And I'm really lucky I have people I can ask. Same goes. If you would like, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to support. I've got quite a few people that, not necessarily that are officially mentored, but just reach out and ask for guidance around their career. Happy to do it because I've been there, done it, got the T-shirt. So
I love this.
You know,
yep, she's earned her stripes too.
Yeah.
And she might be able to, pull a few strings. Maybe just go and have a coffee and build that relationship. I think that's what a lot of us just need, is just knowing that we've got some people in our corner that we can trust and we can lean on when we're finding, even just times when we're dealing with sorry business, or there might be some challenging things that are happening within our work life, or even if we're studying, because some might be coming in as interns or trainees or grads.
It's always a juggle. And I constantly get asked this because a lot of people know that I have 2 young kids. They're like, how do you do everything? And I'm like, sometimes I don't do everything well.
Yeah.
But it's a juggle, right? And it's not impossible. And the thing that I encourage people to do is take the leap.
Yep.
What's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah.
It's this whole thing of, I think a lot of, especially women, and especially when at a certain age they feel like they have to choose between their family and their career.
Yeah.
You don't have to choose.
You can do both.
You can do both. You just need to draw lines in the sand, which is more lines in, and actually I got good advice from, Megan one day, who said, Kylie, if you she said, I came back from holidays and people had put in meetings after 5 o'clock and I couldn't do them because I drew a line in the sand. And then I kind of went, well, if Megan can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
So even I'm learning as we go, but it's about having those conversations so you can learn from people who've gone before you.
There you go. And now you've heard it here on this podcast. Boundaries are really good. Having those boundaries. Yes, but also just not being afraid to speak up and say, actually, I've got this, or I am a young mum, or I am supporting and looking after my grandmother. Like that relationship, but that relationship is so important.
It is, because you understand people and you know what they're going through.
That's
and you
exactly
can support them, because it's that whole thing of, if people know you've got their back, they absolutely work harder.
Of course.
They're more dedicated, more loyal. You don't get turnover employees.
Yep.
It's this whole thing of, it actually becomes a proper team. It's not just it's an actual team. You support each other.
Yeah, you feel that your family. They're your second family.
Second family. Well,
your mob.
You spend a lot of time with them.
I'm really pleased that I've been able to connect with you, and that this conversation is actually part of the Black Magic Woman ANZ Partnership Series. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and just sharing with all of us a little bit about who you are, your journey, and I'm sure that there's a lot there for a lot of people, especially non-Aboriginal people as well, to also learn about some of the challenges for us as mob that are still trying to find our way.
Yeah,
but at the same time, still very proud to be Black and to be who we are.
And honestly, thank you so much for having me. I have absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, as with our conversation last night, and we will continue.
To be continued.
And we will continue to have them. So, but if I can say to everybody, if you haven't done the BlackCard training, please go do it. It's amazing. I just encourage you to learn and lean in.
Thank you.
No worries.
Well, look, I hope you've enjoyed this deadly yarn. I told you it was going to be a deadly yarn. Can't wait to bring you the next episode. So until next time, bye for now.
If you'd like to know more about how ANZ can help improve your financial well-being or help you start, run or grow your business, visit anz.com or call 131314.
A big shout out to all you Deadly Mob and allies who continue to listen, watch and support our podcast. Your feedback means the world. You can rate and review the podcast on Apple and Spotify, or even head to our socials and YouTube channel and drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. The Black Magic Woman podcast is produced by Clint Curtis.